Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Monday, it's November 11th. Today is day 402. I have a lot I want to share today, and I know I'm sorry I've been giving long updates, but so much is happening and the world is ignoring it. In Gaza, there were deadly airstrikes over the weekend that included at least 20 children. One of the strikes over the weekend was in the North Gaza Strip. It hit a series of homes in a besieged refugee camp. What's happening is there's these certain areas in North Gaza, and some of them are completely isolated by the Israeli army where people can't get out. That's why they're saying it's besieged. Israeli strikes on North Gaza killed at least 40 people yesterday, according to officials there and human rights groups. Today, I learned a little bit more about what I talked about last week about this third corridor in Gaza. What's that all about? There's the Philadelphia corridor, the Netzarim corridor. The Netzarim corridor is being expanded to 7 or 8 kilometers wide. That's in the middle of the Gaza Strip. Now there's being a third corridor that's being established between north of the Netzarim corridor, between Gaza City and North Gaza. There's already a checkpoint there, and it's said that that will be a third separation point. So there will be 3 segments of Gaza. There's even been conversation there could be a 4th segmentation further in the south, but that's what that's talking about when they talk about this third corridor in Gaza. A UN-affiliated expert panel on Friday warned that in a rare alert, famine is already present or imminent in North Gaza. Research have relied on partial or biased data and superficial sources with vested interests, said an Israeli military official who rejected the statement, but others who are either human rights workers or UN affiliated have said it's undeniable. The UN Human Rights Office also said on Friday that nearly 70% of the people killed in attacks in Gaza, whose details could be verified, were women and children, indicating a systemic violation of the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law, CNN reported. The IDF is allowing armed Palestinians to loot aid convoys entering Gaza and then to extort and protection money. Now, international aid organizations have reported this. And I heard this in meetings that I've had. Also, I heard it from US officials. I've heard it from aid organizations. What's this all about? Netanyahu and the Israeli government do not want Hamas to have any role in Gaza. A military role, which in general, Israel would say that they have defeated a significant part of the military capacity of Hamas, but they don't want Hamas to have any policing authority. So they're allowing these gangs and armed Palestinians to loot aid convoys so that they can establish themselves as a policing authority. Defense officials have confirmed that IDF is aware of the problem, according to Hebrew news sources and Israeli news sources. They said that at one point, the government considered making the clans to which the armed men belong responsible for distributing aid to the residents in Gaza, even though some of the clan's members are involved in terrorism and some are even affiliated with extremist organizations like the Islamic State. For the record, before October of last year, the Islamic State and some of these groups were considered far more militant than Hamas was before October of 2023. I'm not making any judgments. I'm just saying that's Hamas used to play the role of keeping some of those more militant groups in check. And this is a strategy that's being employed right now in Gaza to let these groups run rampant. How is that going to be constructive is the question that's being asked. Last night, there were reports in the Old City that drone strikes were expected. 2 were knocked out of the sky in the Dead Sea. I wrote that before I actually read the news. I had heard that being reported via my news channels through private sources. But then I saw in the news that actually 4 drones overnight were knocked out of the sky. So last night, as I was going to sleep here in Jerusalem, you could actually hear fighter jets flying overhead. And I'm not going to lie, it was quite unnerving. There were not sonic booms or anything like that. But when you hear fighter jets, when you're trying to go to sleep, I've been telling the people who are here with us to be sure to sleep, in clothes that are appropriate to, if you have to go to a shelter, that type of thing, have shoes next to your bed, a sweatshirt in case you have to get up in the middle of the night. And so to hear that those 4 drones, they were out over the Dead Sea, the IDF intercepted them 2 before they entered the Israeli territory, but the other 2 did enter the Israeli territory. The IDF said it expanded its humanitarian zone into Gaza, and the death toll in Gaza is now at 43,603 Palestinians killed. In Israel, Netanyahu has seen himself as the great winner with Trump's victory. That's been reported. I've talked about that previously. Netanyahu approved the September pager attacks. This is in Lebanon. That came out today in Israeli news. An Arab newspaper in Jerusalem published today that the Jerusalem municipality officially announced, in collaboration with the Ministry of Construction and Housing, plans to establish a settlement on the land of the occupied Kalandia airport. So this is in occupied East Jerusalem. It's north of Jerusalem. Would be a Haredim religious settlement. They're anticipating 7,000 to 9,000 housing units. The neighborhood is supposed to be named after Rabbi Ovadia Yusuf, known for his extreme hostility towards Arabs and Palestinians, and in the past has even called for their extermination by missiles. It was announced today in Israeli media that Israel's Minister of Settlements, Orit Struk, would join the war cabinet. She is a religious Zionist. She's calling for the reestablishment of settlements in Gaza and the increased expansion into the West Bank. She's also called for the settlements to be reestablished in Lebanese territory. To give you an idea about this woman's positions, Orit Struk, she, since 2000, headed the legal political department of Jewish settlers in Hebron. If you know anything about settlers in Hebron, they are some of the most militant settlers and the most ardent. Following the government's 2002 evacuation of settlers from Kiryat Arba, Struk founded the human rights organization of Judea and Samaria to advocate for settlers' rights. In the West Bank, IDF forces evacuated 5 buildings that were erected on private Palestinian land in Oz Zion, an illegal outpost, in light of security concerns and criminal incidents that were arising from that area. And far-right minister Smotrich said in a meeting of his religious Zionist party that during Trump's previous term, they were steps away from applying sovereignty over the settlements, and now is the time to do it. He put on X that 2025 is the year of Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. So the settler movement in Israel calls the occupied West Bank Judea and Samaria. And what Smotrich is saying, he's insinuating that the West Bank, or at least parts thereof, would be annexed to become a part of Israel under Trump's presidency next year. Qatar on Saturday says it's pausing its ceasefire mediation efforts over a failure by Israel and Hamas to make progress in light of Gaza. And families of hostages see this news as devastating. What hope they have left for hostages who might be alive seems to be dissipating and disappearing. Where are there any active negotiations for the release of hostages happening? And so families are protesting even tonight in Tel Aviv in front of the IDF headquarters, calling for ceasefire negotiations to be reestablished. Israeli Defense Minister Katz, this is the new defense minister, said yesterday that his country has defeated Hezbollah and must continue to put pressure in order to bring about the fruits of victory. 23 people were killed in Lebanon's Mount Lebanon province yesterday. And an earlier update, Lebanese authorities said that Israel's bombardment of South Beirut killed at least 40 people on Friday. And there were at least 185 rockets at Haifa and northern Israel today. There was a barrage of about 50 to 90 rockets that left 5 people injured in Israel today. The death toll in Lebanon has now reached at least 3,243 people since October of last year. The U.S. this week has said they're going to assess Israel's progress on the Gaza aid crisis and decide how it should respond. They're now just about at that point of the 1-year mark. Reports in Israel have indicated there's fear within the Netanyahu camp of whether or not the U.S. might actually withhold any weapons because of the lack of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza. The number and amount is abysmal. And we are 2 days before the expiration of that 30-day ultimatum that assured and demanded that Israel significantly increase humanitarian assistance entering Gaza. Israeli officials and Western diplomats reported it is becoming likely the U.S. will officially designate Israel as non-compliant, which could lead to the suspension of arms deliveries, and questioning whether or not the U.S. might not veto UN Security Council resolutions related to Israel. Although the Trump administration would reverse the Biden administration policies, Biden still has over 2 months left in the office. And, quote, that's enough time to cause us serious pain, end quote, said a senior Israeli official. While college campuses have now been back to school for almost a full semester, we have not seen the degree of protests that we saw at the end of the spring semester, but it's being reported that there is an increase in pro-Hamas messages that have spread across college campuses. The U.S. and the United Kingdom have launched raids on the Yemeni capital Sana and the Houthi-run media reported over the weekend. Separately, the U.S. on Saturday carried out a series of strikes in Yemen on Houthi targets there. At an emergency Arab-Muslim summit focusing in Saudi Arabia, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman condemned, quote, the genocide that Israel is committing against the Palestinian people and the deliberate military actions that violate Lebanon's sovereignty, end quote. Bin Salman emphasized the need to continue joint efforts to establish a Palestinian state within the 67 borders, whose capital would be East Jerusalem. I'll just remind you, take a look at the plan that was in play when Trump was president previously. He had a plan that East Jerusalem would be the future capital of the Palestinian state, but he was not including the old city of Jerusalem. He was including the Arab enclaves, Abu Dis, the Arab villages around Jerusalem, where everything else would be a part of Israel. And so what you mean by East Jerusalem really, really makes a difference. I just want to close by saying, in the middle of all this chaos and horrific, horrific, horrific news, the more meetings I have, the more horrific the news seems to be, I'm still encountering God in the midst of this place and in the midst of these people. The most beautiful examples of love and humanity breaking through, meeting with development agencies that are working night and day. Palestinian people in Gaza, I just heard about tents being delivered by Palestinians who've been suffering the last, 13, 14 months right alongside, family members, and they're losing members of their staff, and they are continuing to serve day by day by day. People and humanity showing love and kindness, overcoming violence and hatred and trauma. And tonight I had dinner with two beautiful Catholic nuns, sisters, who live and serve here in the Holy Land. One of them talked about her calling and an opportunity she had to minister alongside of survivors of the October 7th attacks. And she talked about how she got a phone call and she was asked to come and to provide comfort and the love of God in the midst of those horrors to people from her country of origin. And how people, it was some of their most terrifying moments of their lives. And over this dinner, we shared these stories of loss and trauma and sorrow. And then we laughed and shared joy. And then I found out that these two nuns are from the very same order that has served for decades and decades on the very small, tiny island where I live back home in the United States. In the island chain where I live, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away from here. And this order is so small. And these nuns I had dinner with are from that very same community. And I thought, what are the chances that only God works that way, weaving together the tapestry of his creation to remind us that God is at work, that he has not abandoned us, that he hears the cries of his people, that one day he will come and that he will bring peace. A beautiful reminder for us to not give up hope. Do not give up working and advocating for justice. May God come quickly and may peace come alongside of him. In the name of Christ, amen.